Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name's Hugh Stewart. Thanks for joining us tonight. First of all, I'm going to begin with the update from Ukraine and their defence against Russia's invasion. This is day 205. Prosecutors, police officers and journalists are heading to Izium after authorities there said they had found a mass grave containing more than 440 bodies. While authorities said some had been killed by shelling and airstrikes, investigators have prepared themselves for the worst after discoveries of slain civilians bearing signs of torture in Bucha and other previously occupied territories. Andriy Yermak, the presidential chief of staff in Ukraine, accused Russia of being a murderer country, a state sponsor of terrorism. Estonia's Prime Minister Kallas urged people to not look away from the images emerging from the liberated Ukrainian cities like Izium. She said, "This is the face of Russian occupation. Towns and cities turned into mass graves." Russia has accused Ukraine of carrying out targeted strikes in the cities of Kherson and Luhansk against local officials who have been collaborating with Moscow. In the eastern city of Luhansk, a pro-Russian prosecutor and his deputy died when their office was blown up. The cause of the explosion was not immediately clear. Irina Vereshchuk, the Minister of Reintegration of Temporarily Occupied Territories, has said that Ukraine's government has approved a draft law that will punish people for forcing Russian passports onto Ukrainian citizens. NATO General Secretary Jens Stoltenberg said Ukraine's counterattack against Russian troops had been very effective, but warned nations should prepare for a long haul, as this does not signal the beginning of the end of the war. Germany has taken the German subsidiary of the Russian oil giant Rosneft under state control, putting 3 refineries into trusteeship ahead of a partial European embargo on Russian oil at the end of the year. European Union President Ursula von der Leyen has said that she wants Russian President Vladimir Putin to face the International Criminal Court over war crimes in Ukraine. Pope Francis says it was morally legitimate for countries to provide weapons to Ukraine to help it defend itself from Russian aggression. Ukraine has lost nearly 15% of its grain storage capacity in the war, threatening its role as a key food supplier to the world, according to a report from a US government-backed conflict observatory. And finally, in Ukraine, President Biden has announced a new $600 million arms package for Ukraine, according to a White House memo sent to the State Department on Thursday. Now let's turn to the UK economy. And UK's lowest paid workers face a tough financial squeeze. Almost 80% of the UK's lowest paid workers say they are now facing the toughest financial squeeze of their lifetimes, according to new research by the Living Wage Foundation. Liz Truss has limited a further increase in utility bills with her energy price guarantee, a measure which could cost taxpayers more than £100 billion eventually, but poorer households are already struggling to make ends meet. A poll of more than 2,000 workers earning less than a living wage of £9.90 an hour, or £11.05 in London, found that 78% say that this is the worst financial period they have ever faced. More than half had used a food bank in the last year, while 42% reported regularly skipping meals for financial reasons. More than 1/5 of these workers, that's 21%, said that they had no money at all left after paying for essentials such as food and rent. As many as 4.8 million people in the workforce have earnings of less than the real living wage. The rates are calculated annually by the Resolution Foundation think tank based on the minimum income required to cover the basic cost of living. More than 2/3 of the workers surveyed said that the financial situation had negatively affected their levels of anxiety and their overall quality of life, with women particularly badly affected. The Living Wage Foundation accredits employers who promise to pay their workers at least the real living wage. The new rate for 22-23 is due to be announced next week, and is expected to mark a significant increase given the high inflation across the country. The UK government's national living wage, the legal minimum wage for adults over 23 years of age, is currently £9.50 an hour. Economists have warned that the UK government's proposed tax cuts would not benefit the lowest paid, many of whom already pay little or no tax. Also in the economy now, pressure on the UK pound. Fears that the UK economy is already in recession after a slump in retail sales last month triggered heavy selling of the pound on international monetary markets, taking it to a 37-year low against the dollar. With average UK wages continuing to fall behind rising prices and the Bank of England expected to push up interest rates next week, sterling fell by more than 1% against the US currency to $1.135, and that's its lowest since 1985. On the 30th anniversary of Black Wednesday, when the UK crashed out of the European exchange rate mechanism, the pound also hit a 17-month low against the euro, with the pound today worth the euro is worth 87.66p. A report from the World Bank added to the gloomy prognosis for the UK after it said rising interest rates could push the global economy into recession next year, badly affecting nations such as the UK that depend on revenues from trade. The worsening global outlook came as the latest official data released on Friday morning, that's today, showed cash-strapped consumers cut back on spending by more than expected in August, when retail sales volumes in the UK fell by 1.6%. Economists had predicted a more modest fall of 0.5%. The fall in sales last month was broad-based, with petrol stations, supermarkets, clothing and furniture stores all experiencing a drop, according to the Office for National Statistics, the ONS. Last time this happened was July 2021, and when all the legal COVID restrictions on hospitality were lifted and people headed out to bars and restaurants. The ONS said that rising prices and the cost of living were hitting retail sales in the UK, and economists warned signs were there that the economy is already in recession. Let's look at Wales next and the royal succession. Welsh First Minister Mark Drakeford has said that anti-monarchists have a right to protest in Cardiff when King Charles III was visiting the Welsh capital today, but called on them to be restrained. Mr Drakeford also made it clear that he did not expect there to be an extravagant investiture for William, the Prince of Wales, but said he could play an important role in Welsh life. The Labour First Minister said that while nobody would expect William to suddenly become fluent in Welsh, he believed he would want to recognise its importance in shaping modern life in Wales. A silent anti-monarchist demonstration began at 1 p.m. at Cardiff Castle, organised under the banner Real Democracy Now. Speaking on BBC Radio 4's Today programme, Mr Drakeford said, people have a legitimate right to protest and there are a variety of views. He said the policing of a protest should be proportionate. It should recognise the rights that people have. I have every confidence in the South Wales Police, who have dealt with this sort of event many times. They will deal proportionately with protest, making sure that those rights are respected, but that those rights don't interfere with what most people will have come to Cardiff today to exercise. The King's visit is taking in Owen Gwyndor Day, which is a celebration of the life and legacy of the last Welshman to be known as the Prince of Wales. Many nationalists and Republicans see the title as symbolising English oppression, and more than 27,000 people have now signed a petition for the Prince of Wales to be abolished. Mohammed bin Salman's plan to touch down in London on Sunday to pay his respects to the Queen has been condemned by Gegnitz and other human rights defenders as a stain on the monarch's memory and an attempt by the Saudi Crown Prince to use mourning to seek legitimacy and normalisation. Ms Cengiz, who was engaged to Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi journalist who was killed and dismembered by Saudi agents in the Istanbul consulate in 2018, said she wished that Prince Mohammed would be arrested for murder when he lands in London, but said she feared that the UK authorities would turn a blind eye to serious and credible allegations against the future king. It has been reported that Prince Mohammed will travel to the UK to deliver his kingdom's condolences to the royal family, though there was no confirmation or information about whether he would attend the funeral service at Westminster Abbey. CNN Arabic First reported the news on Thursday night. The news that the heir to the Saudi throne would be making his first trip to London since 2018 was met with dismay by some Saudis in exile, including Abdullah Alu, a prominent Washington-based Saudi dissident who serves as a research director of Dawn, a non-profit organisation founded by Khashoggi, which promotes democracy in the Middle East. Former UK Defence Secretary Liam Fox, who is standing to become the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, which scrutinises Foreign Office ministers and officials over key policies, is facing questions over his suitability for the role after receiving payments from a PR firm that has worked for governments with poor human rights records. According to parliamentary records, he has been paid £20,000 since August 21 to provide advice on business and international politics to World PR, a firm based in the tax haven of Panama City. Clients of the firm, according to its website, have included multiple Kazakhstan government departments and agencies since 2004. According to Human Rights Watch, free speech in Kazakhstan is suppressed, trade unions are harassed, and impunity for torture persists. World PR has worked with government agencies in Azerbaijan, according to the state-owned oil company, to communicate its success in multiple fields. According to Amnesty International, prosecution of government critics, gender-based violence, torture, and other ill treatment remains widespread across the country. A spokesman for Mr. Fox said he had never worked for Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, or other former clients, and has only joined the firm since 2021. He also disputed whether Panama was a tax haven, saying it was closely aligned to top-level OECD standards. Alistair Graham, the former chair of the Committee for Standards in Public Life, has questioned whether Fox would be a suitable new chair for the committee. Fox is standing against Ian Duncan-Smith, the former Conservative Party leader, with Alicia Cairns a member of the committee and one of the 29 intake of MPs. Only Tory MPs can stand to become Foreign Affairs Committee's next chair according to standing orders. Select Committee chairs receive an extra £15,000 in salary. SNP's Stuart MacDonald, a member of the committee, indicated that he would not support Fox for the role. I would not be supporting Liam Fox, and I certainly wouldn't be advising my fellow SNP colleagues to support him, he said. We are entering the autumn to winter period in which the war in Ukraine enters a whole new dynamic. The immediate crisis on our doorstep needs a serious, steady person in the chair of this really important committee. Okay, October rail strikes threaten to disrupt the Conservative conference. Disruption to rail services across the UK will resume after the Queen's funeral next week, with drivers at 12 train operating companies staging further coordinated strike at the start of October. Operators are understood to have been notified of two 24-hour walkouts on the 1st and the 5th of October, which would affect services across the country and bring rail chaos at the beginning and the end of the Conservative Party conference, which is in Birmingham. ASLEF declined to comment, saying it would not be making any statement until Tuesday. Strikes had been scheduled by ASLEF and the RMT union originally for the 15th and the 17th of September, but were called off by the trade unions on the news of the death of the monarch. However, it was expected that further action would resume in this long-standing dispute over pay and working conditions on the railway, with train operators unable to or unwilling to meet demands for the pay rise in line with the cost of living. The operators affected, who are unlikely to run any trains on strike days, include Avanti West Coast, Chiltern, Cross Country, West Midlands trains, all of which directly service Birmingham, where Conservatives are going to hold their annual conference, the first under Liz Truss's leadership. The other firms at which drivers will strike are Greater Anglia, Great Western Railway, Hull Trains, LNER, London Overground, Northern, South Western and TransPennine Express. ScotRail is not affected by the dispute. Other strikes proposed after the news of the Queen's death have yet to have their new dates confirmed. To Italy now, at least 9 people were killed by torrential overnight rain and floods in the central Italian region of Marche as rescuers continued to search for 4 people still missing. In Cantanaio, a village close to the neighbouring Umbria region, Residents were sweeping mud from the streets. Reuters footage showed after torrents had swept through several towns, leaving a trail of trapped and damaged cars. Around 400 millimetres of rain fell within 2 or 3 hours, the Civil Protection Agency said, and that's a third of the amount usually received in a year. The head of the National Civil Protection Agency, Fabrizio Curcio, met local officials in Marque's capital of Ancona to assess the damage, while party chiefs campaigning for Italy's September 25th elections expressed their solidarity. Footage released by fire brigades showed rescuers on rafts trying to evacuate people in the seaside town of Senigallia, while others attempted to clear the underpass of debris. Some 300 firefighters are currently operating in the area and have rescued dozens of people who had climbed onto roofs and trees overnight to escape the floods, according to the fire brigade. Stefano Uguzzi, the head of civil protection at Marque's regional government, said the downpour was far stronger than had been forecast. And over to the Mar-a-Lago investigation into Donald Trump. A federal judge has named Raymond Deary, a senior US district judge with experience in handling US national security matters, as the independent arbiter to vet records seized by the FBI from Donald Trump's Florida estate in the ongoing criminal investigation. Florida-based US Judge Aileen Cannon appointed Deary on Thursday to serve as a special master in the legal fight between Trump and the Department of Justice over government documents which the former president had kept in his Florida resort. Deary was one of two candidates for the post proposed by the former president, and the US Justice Department said it would not oppose his appointment. In her order, Justice Cannon also rejected the Justice Department's demand that prosecutors would be allowed to continue their review of the seized records while the dispute is ongoing, and their assertion that the investigation is urgent due to the classified and sensitive material in the records. Deary, who's 78 years old and based in Brooklyn, is tasked with deciding whether any of the documents seized by the FBI during the August search are privileged, that is either due to attorney-client confidentiality or through a legal principle called executive privilege, which would make them off limits to investigators. Mr. Deary has until the 30th of November, after the midterms, to finish the review. Mr. Trump will be required to pay costs associated with the appointment of the special master. Earlier this month, Cannon had granted a request by Trump's lawyers to name a special master to vet the seized records. Mr. Trump is under investigation by the Department of Justice for retaining government records, some of which were marked classified or top secret at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach, Florida, after leaving office in January 21. During a search of his property, FBI agents seized more than 11,000 records and 48 empty folders which were marked classified. The Justice Department also is looking into possible obstruction of the investigation after it found evidence that records may have been removed or concealed from the FBI when it sent agents to the property in June to try to recover all the classified documents. The Justice Department has said in a court filing on Monday that Deary's experience as a judge qualified him for the special master role, but opposed other candidates proposed by Trump's team, including attorney Paul Huck. Trump's lawyer opposed the two retired federal judges who had been proposed by the department. Excuse me. Over to Lebanon. 5 Lebanese banks were held up by depositors seeking access to their own money frozen in the banking system today in a spiralling state of hold-ups this week, spurred by frustration over a financial implosion with no end in sight. A total of 7 banks had been held up since Wednesday in Lebanon, where commercial banks have locked most depositors out of their savings since an economic crisis took hold 3 years ago, leaving much of the population unable to pay for basics. On Friday morning, an armed man identified as Zahab Subra identified the BLOM bank in the capital's Tariq Yedidi neighbourhood, demanding his deposits. The bank told Reuters he was still locked in the branch hours later, telling Reuters by phone that he had handed over his gun to security forces and he just wanted his money. Subra said he had refused an offer by the bank to take a portion of his $300,000 in savings. with a significant haircut and in the deteriorating local Lebanese currency. Mr. Stewart was cheered by a large crowd of people gathered outside, including Bassam al-Sheikh Hussein, who carried out the very first hold-up in August to get his own deposits from the bank, which dropped the charges against him. Lebanon's the Banking Association announced a 3-day closure next week over mounting security concerns and called on the government to pass the necessary laws to deal with the crisis. Authorities have been slow to pass reforms which could grant them access to $3 billion from the International Monetary Fund to ease the crisis. Among the laws in waiting is the close law, still being debated by Parliament. In its absence, banks have imposed unilateral limits on most depositors, allowing them to retrieve only limited amounts each week in US dollars or in Lebanese pounds. Withdrawals in Lebanese pounds are worth less and less, as the lira has lost more than 95% of its value since 2019 and edged towards a new low of 38,000 to the dollar this week. Banks say they allow exceptional withdrawals for humanitarian cases, including healthcare payments, but depositors say the banks have not stuck to their word. Friday's incidents followed 2 others in the capital of Beirut and in the town of Ali on Wednesday, in which depositors were able to access a portion of their funds by force, using toy pistols mistaken for real weapons. And now a Glasgow story tonight. Oran Moore has announced that the Scotsman Group has invested in Skerryvore Limited, which is the company that runs the Glasgow West End venue, famous for its play, pie and a pint theatre and its selection of malt whiskies. The Oran Moore was found 20 years ago by Colin Beattie, who will continue working with the business as the chairman of Skerryvore Limited. The Scotsman Group, formerly the GI Group, is run by its founding director, Glasgow bar venue and property entrepreneur Stephen King. Scotsman Group already operates in the West End with the Hillhead Book Club, the Grosvenor Cinema and Cafe, and the Bothy in Ruthven Lane. Okay, well that's about it tonight. No guests, so we haven't had to detain you very long. So don't forget, we're on Sunday lunchtime with the full Scottish set goes out at 12 o'clock, so I hope you'll join us then. So that's it for this evening, but before I go, can I just remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who has donated and everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month or more, then please consider becoming one of our Broadcasting Scotland supporters. You can see the website below, and the link will be on there if you log on to broadcastingscotland.scot. We have set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers, which would enable us to employ staff and then make more programmes. Okay, that's it from me tonight. Thank you for watching. We'll be back on Sunday, and the evening news will continue from next Monday onwards. Okay, good night.